Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving deep into thought management and faith with Michael Leedon from Unchained Disciples Ministry. You seem really interested in how our thoughts shape things and aligning them with faith. We've got a YouTube video transcript, some Bible study notes, and even some extra resources.
Yeah, some fascinating stuff.
Definitely. Okay, so Leedon opens with this powerful image, this famous opera singer literally being deafened by her own voice.
Wow.
It's like a metaphor.
Yeah.
For how that inner critic, the negative self-talk, can drown out reality, even God's truth.
Powerful analogy. And he goes on, digging into where this negativity comes from. Childhood, big life events, hopes, fears for the future. It's like mapping the terrain of our minds.
Exactly. And he makes this point about negativity bias. We remember the bad stuff more vividly.
Right. Like our brains are wired for threats, even if it's all in our heads. Think about it. Ever get a weird look from someone? Or a coworker says something and it sticks with you.
Oh, totally.
Negativity bias. And Leydon says this can even affect our decisions. He mentions a study. People were more likely to reject a medical procedure when the doctor focused on the failure rate.
Even if the success rate was the same.
Statistically, yeah, negativity just skews things.
So how do we fight back? It feels so ingrained. Leydon uses Psalm 22, right? The psalmist starts in despair, but then shifts to waiting on God.
Not a quick fix, more a process. And that's where his strategies come in. Positive self-talk.
Okay, so there's actually science behind this.
Oh yeah, tons of research.
Yeah.
Positive self-talk, it can improve thinking, confidence, even help us manage emotions better.
Like having your own little cheerleader in your head. Yeah. But what does that look like practically?
Leydon gives examples. One is rephrasing. Instead of, I'm terrible at this, it's, I'm learning, getting better every day.
That's good. I've also heard, like, talking to yourself in third person. Does he mention that?
He does, tells a funny story. A guy in the grocery store kept saying, "It's okay, Timmy, don't cry." Turns out, he was talking to himself. Woman thought he was a great dad.
Oh, that's hilarious. But it makes sense, right? Like, creates psychological distance.
Exactly. Detach from the emotions, see things more objectively. And Leydon really stresses aligning our self-talk with the Bible. Instead of dwelling on mistakes, remind yourself, I am forgiven.
So choosing truth over self-condemnation.
Yes. Not denying reality, but shifting focus. But then there's the really tough ones, intrusive thoughts. The ones that just pop up can be disturbing. Leydon talks about that, right?
He does. And he makes this distinction between having those thoughts versus being controlled by them.
Huge difference. Most people experience them. It's the reaction that matters.
So what does he suggest when they, come knocking?
He has a 4-step strategy. First, don't catastrophize. See it as harassment, not an atomic bomb.
Okay, so don't give it more power. What's next?
Firmly renounce the thought. Don't entertain it. Just reject it.
Got it. Acknowledged, rejected?
Yeah.
Then what?
Replace it with the truth from Scripture. I'm worthless becomes I am fearfully and wonderfully made.
Powerful. Negative to positive scriptural truth. Final step.
Take it to God in prayer. Ask for help overcoming the harassment.
So proactive approach.
Absolutely. We have tools, we're not passive, and one of the most effective is this idea of cognitive diffusion.
Always hoping we'd get to that.
Yeah.
Fascinating concept.
Right. So learning to observe thoughts without automatically believing them. Simple technique. Add, I'm having thought that before the intrusive thought.
Like, I'm having the thought that I'm a failure.
Yes. Put space between you and the thought.
So freeing. But what about those negative thought loops? Just ruminating over and over.
Simple solution. Nature. Leydon cites a Stanford study, 90-minute walk in nature, significantly reduced activity in the brain region linked to mental illness.
Compared to, like, walking in the city.
Exactly.
It's not just the exercise, it's the environment.
There's something about being in nature. It calms us. We detach from those patterns.
Like hitting reset.
Totally. And it all leads to Leydon's final point, the story of Elijah. After a victory, he's threatened, flees to the wilderness, feeling defeated, desperate.
Oh, that's relatable. From a high to completely overwhelmed. Then what?
God comes to Elijah, but in a whisper. It's like a reminder that the loudest voices aren't always the right ones.
So finding that quiet space to connect.
Exactly. And Leydon emphasizes this closeness to God. It's not accidental. We pursue it. Prayer, worship, scripture.
Cultivating that intimacy, recognizing his voice in the noise. This is already so insightful. I'm ready for more.
Yeah, Leydon's real-world examples are great. Ready for part 2?
Let's do it.
It's one thing to talk about these ideas, but seeing them in action, that's powerful. Ledden's great at that, using stories, examples.
Yeah, his style is so relatable. Any favorites?
He talks about like being so hard on himself, little mistakes, he called himself stupid, incompetent. Then he realized it was just echoing that inner critic, not encouraging himself.
Oh, I think we've all been there.
Yeah.
Easy to fall into those patterns.
Totally.
Yeah.
And we accept those thoughts as truth, no questions asked. Ledden's like, hold on, is this really true? Helpful? Does it line up with what God says about me?
That's so important, being more discerning about what we let in.
Exactly. He also talks about this connection, our physical posture and our thoughts, emotions. He mentions Tony Robbins, the motivational speaker, standing tall, shoulders back, projecting confidence.
I've heard that, but never really got the, science behind it.
It's wild. Studies show posture affects hormones, stress response, even how well we think. So, feeling down, adjust your posture, stand up straight, smile, see if it helps.
I'm going to try that. Simple change, big impact. Didn't he also have a personal example? Something
Yeah.
about his mother-in-law.
Yeah. He used to dread taking care of her,
Yeah.
saying, I have to do this. But then he shifted his language, started saying, I get to take care of her.
Subtle, but huge.
Right. Total change in perspective. Not a burden, but an opportunity. Love, honor, made all the difference.
Like that power of gratitude, right? Focusing on what we're thankful for, it shifts things.
Absolutely. Gratitude, antidote to negativity. And not just feeling good, studies show real mental and physical benefits.
Leadin also tackles the tough stuff.
Yep.
He talks about the unforgivable sin, something I think a lot of people struggle with.
Oh, yeah, that one can cause a lot of fear. But Leedon's perspective is comforting. He explains it's not a single act, but a state of the heart, rejecting God's truth and grace.
Important distinction. Not a moment of weakness, but a continual turning away.
Right. And he emphasizes as long as we have that desire to turn to God, seek forgiveness, we're not beyond his reach.
Reassuring for anyone wrestling with those fears. He also brings in stories from Unchained disciples, right?
He does. One that stuck with me, a woman struggling with intrusive thoughts. She'd gone through multiple near-death experiences, intense trauma, felt disconnected from God, questioning everything.
That's heartbreaking. Sadly, a reality for many who experience trauma.
Yeah.
What was Leedon's response?
He, along with others in the group, offered encouragement, reminded her of God's love, faithfulness.
So a whole community.
Exactly. They were like, you're not alone. Encouraged her to see what God was doing, trust his timing, even use her experiences to help others going through similar things.
That's powerful. Shared experiences, using our pain to help others.
Ledden also says, don't compare your spiritual journey. God speaks to each of us uniquely. Our intimacy with him changes with different seasons.
So important, especially today, with all the comparison going around.
Right. Focus on your own relationship with God, seek him, trust the process.
And that brings us back to spending time in his word.
Absolutely. Ledden's like, the Bible is how God talks to us. Immerse yourself, even when you don't feel like it.
Even when it's dry, we feel distant.
Exactly. That's when we need it most. It's the lifeline. Connects us to his heart, reminds us of his promises.
This is so insightful, practical, encouraging for those thought life challenges.
Agreed. And there's more. Ledden dives into the connection between thoughts and physical health. Ready for part 3?
Absolutely. I'm hooked. All right, let's get into this connection between thoughts and physical health. What's Leydon's take?
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. Ledden doesn't just talk about, the mental and spiritual side of things. He links it to our bodies. Says our thoughts can actually impact our health.
That's pretty powerful stuff. I've heard of the mind-body connection, but I'd love to hear more about Leydon's perspective.
Yeah, he even throws out this number, something like 75 to 90% of illnesses stem from our thought life.
Wow, that's a huge percentage. What kind of evidence backs that up?
He talks about how our thoughts trigger stuff in our bodies, immune system, hormones, even how cells regenerate. It's like our body's listening in to every thought, every belief.
So if we're always thinking negative, it's like we're constantly stressing our bodies out.
Exactly. And over time, that leads to problems. Inflammation, weak immune system, all sorts of things. Like, the mind-body connection goes both ways. Thoughts impact health, and health impacts thoughts.
That makes sense. It reminds me of the placebo effect. People get better just because they believe they're getting treatment, even if it's fake.
Perfect example. Power of the mind. And it works the other way, too. Take care of your body, exercise, eat well, sleep enough. It helps your mood, your focus, everything.
Like a positive feedback loop. Good thoughts, good habits, all working together.
Exactly. Now, Leydon also mentions this study about Pentecostals. They often focus on faith healing and prosperity, right?
Yeah.
Well, the study found they were actually more likely to experience depression, like 3 times more likely compared to other Christian groups.
That's really surprising. Why would that be?
Layton suggests maybe it's the prosperity doctrine itself, focusing on material blessings, name it and claim it. What if those blessings don't come? Disappointment, feeling like you failed.
Right. It's a good reminder that faith isn't about manipulating God to get what we want. It's surrendering, trusting his goodness, even when things are tough.
And that ties into Layton's point about aligning our thoughts with God's truth, not our own desires. It's about his perspective, his wisdom, his peace.
Powerful stuff. He's not just giving us tools, but pointing us back to the source of real peace and healing.
Yeah. He ends with this message of hope. Reminds us we're not defined by our past, our mistakes, even our struggles right now. We are who God says we are, his children, forgiven, redeemed.
That's so encouraging. It's like, no matter what, God's love and grace are there.
He wants us to embrace that truth and let it change how we think. It's a journey, renewing our minds, aligning our thoughts with God's love, grace, and truth.
Wow, what a deep dive. We've covered so much. Positive self-talk, challenging negativity, surrendering to God, that mind-body connection.
We've got practical tools too. Cognitive diffusion, getting out in nature, the power of community. It's all about taking control of our thought lives, finding peace, joy, even better physical health.
I love it. So as we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with this. What if, just 15 minutes a day, you focused on cultivating a more positive, faith-filled mind? What could happen if you really applied all this?
The answer's up to you. You have the power to choose what you think about, how you respond to life's challenges. Leon's given us the tools. Now it's time to use them.
Absolutely. That's a great reminder for all of us. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into thought management and faith. Until next time, keep thinking those good thoughts.